All right, just to confirm for my listeners, who I got on the phone here is DJ Supa Ape. Am I saying that right?
That's right, yeah. Maybe lose the DJ, but Supa Ape, yeah.
You know
Me.
what? This has happened with other artists where they don't like the DJ or MC. And honestly, your name does sound better without the DJ. It should be Supa Ape. I got on the phone here.
I got nothing against DJ Supa Ape, but yeah.
Well, you're more than a DJ. You're more than a DJ, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, but I would probably, I'm more of a music producer than a DJ. I DJ, but I'm not a DJ's DJ. If that makes sense.
Well, and you know what? We'll get into that later in the discussion. The first few questions I've got are fun ones just to get to know you a little, and then we'll dive into some industry. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Can you tell me what was the last song you were listening to before we spoke?
I was listening to what was it? It was a Dillinger mix on YouTube, and it was like a Dillinger tune. It was like Perfect Match. And I think that's where I stopped the mix.
Okay.
I don't know if you know that tune, Perfect Match by Dillinger. Like a 94 tune with put like wicked amen edits.
Well, yeah, that's 94 was all about that.
So, yeah?
I said 94 was all about the amen slapping all around, right?
Exactly, yeah. Like a lot of those tunes, like you listen to them now, and the edits and that, they're still, you wouldn't think that they were able to do that on an Akai or whatever back then, but yeah, it's crazy, man.
Well, yeah, and you know what? Atari, I know, was a big name back then. A lot of the names from the pioneer days, I guess, have faded. But definitely cool tools to look at. I said they should almost have a Hall of Fame for drum and bass where you could see some of the equipment our OGs produced on and see how primitive it really was.
Absolutely, yeah, totally. Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you this. What was the first album you ever purchased with your own money?
Well, it wasn't Jungle. It would have been back when I was listening to something like, I'd have been like 12 or 13. It would either been something like Green Day, Warning, or like System of a Down, Toxicity, or something like that on CD. One of those two. I don't know, something like that.
Well, and you know what? You kind of date yourself with those album picks because personally, my first was a cassette tape, and it was Hootie and the Blowfish. So there's no shame. I grew up on grunge and on hard rock. I liked Korn System, but I grew up liking like Traveling Wilburys and classic rock. And yeah, my first album was Hootie and the Blowfish. So
yeah, totally.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah.
What was the first concert you ever attended as a child?
Well, when I was a kid, I was like taking lessons for like different instruments, and I used to play in like like orchestras when I was a kid. So before I'd have gone into like the band, I don't know, it'd have been some pop punk, I don't know, something like Bowling for Soup or something like that. But I used to go to see concerts and stuff when I was a little kid with my parents, so it'd have been something like that, but exactly what it was, I don't know.
Well, you know what, it's interesting because, when I get answers, typically it's something like, Silverchair, or like you said, System of a Down, but it probably was something more like Skinnamarink Dinky Dink, Skinnamarink Doo, if you really want to go back, right?
Exactly, yeah. If you're really being honest about it, I could give you the kind of cool answer, but yeah.
No, I like the honest answer. That's awesome.
Like that.
Okay, let's dive into some industry ones. What was your first experience with the rave?
With a rave? So Sheffield, some kind of crew like, so Sheffield's north of England for people who don't know, overseas. Some kind of crew like Jungle Syndicate, another crew in Sheffield called Off Me Nut, who do like a lot of jungle stuff, but it was like 4x4 bassline garage, happy hardcore, really like lots of piano stab heavy rave silliness music, that kind of thing. I'm not sure what age I'd have been, maybe 16 or 17, something like that. And Sheffield surrounded by absolutely beautiful like wilderness, and yeah, and these guys used to every few weeks we have a big link up, maybe 4 or 5 sound systems, go out into the woods somewhere and do these big parties. So that was my first,
That's
first
awesome.
kind of rave experience. Yeah.
Well, and it sounds really interesting. It almost sounds like nowadays they have these silent raves where people go into the woods with headphones or whatever, and there's no. Have you heard of what I'm talking
I've never
about?
heard of those. I've heard of those. Like I think I've at some festival when I was younger, probably like Leeds or some UK festival. I've been in like a tent where they've done that, but I've never heard of that in the woods.
Well, and you know what it is? From what I hear,
is that something they do?
It's for noise pollution because they don't want to bother the residents that are in their small homes because they get kicked out of the woods. So they put on headphones and they throw their rave.
A lot of sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense. That's a new one. I've never heard of that. Yeah.
Well, and you know what I want to say about Sheffield? Personally, Sheffield was put on the map for me for 2 reasons. One is Sheffield Arena, and another would be the tragic incident that happened back in the late '80s or whatever with that soccer stadium where all those people got.
Yeah.
So that was Sheffield, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That's great. Yeah. That was in the news again recently, actually.
Why?
Why? The trial's still going on there. The families of these. So what it was this horrible crush incident where I think they basically let too many people into the football stadium, and then there was this.
If I can give a little background on what I know of
people got crushed in the crowds basically, and the families are trying to, press charge against the police and the people who are responsible for letting too many people in, and it's like, well, like I say, it's like 20 years ago and it's still going on. So it's a terrible thing, right?
It is, and just I want to sidebar just to say what I know of the event is there was a bunch of people that they were trying to separate for hooliganism. They didn't want people to riot, so they tried to put some people through one door and some people through another. But then some hooligans broke in through one of the doors and caused a mass pileup, and they just kept sending people into that doorway. And you say,
it's something like that.
50 people I think passed. It was a tragic incident, and hopefully those families find resolution. It's horrible to hear that. You say 20. I think it's been almost 30 years, to be honest. I don't know too much about it other than what I've said, really. But it was in the news last week. Okay, well, let's jump back into the industry here. I read when I was reading up on you that you attended some schooling for production, I believe, called Spirit Records, and I wanted to ask you, what is that? What is Spirit Records?
So Spirit Studios is the...
Sorry, Studios.
It's a part of SSR, which is School of Sound Recording. And they've just straight changed the name to Spirit Studios now, but I went a few years ago, and I just did a 2-year sound engineering course, and... Spirit Studios refers to, they've got the best studio, if you like, that they've got there, with a big Neve desk and really professional quality. They've had some big artists coming in out there. That is called Spirit Studios, and then there are several other smaller studios which kind of make up SSR, and they do degree level qualifications there and all sorts of stuff. So,
well, that's awesome. Would you say that? Go ahead.
Yeah, go on.
Okay, I was just going to say, do you think that what you learned in those 2 years is something that has made you better at what you're doing today? Like, are you glad that you went to that school?
Yeah, definitely, man. I mean, like, just having access to all the hardware and forcing yourself to learn on a desk with real compressors, with real EQs, with everything outside the box, if you like, forces you to kind of to make kind of more educated decisions when you are on a computer and you're not just throwing things in and not thinking about the signal flow and there are certain ways of doing things and rules are there to be broken, but definitely having access to that gear helped me to develop.
Well, there's a lot in what you just said. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, recording, learning to record bands is good as well, because if you're kind of, you've got a source sound. When you're doing a remix or when you're like pulling samples from vinyl or ripping stuff off the internet or whatever, you've got the luxury of you can listen through 1,000 samples and pick one that sounds pretty good already. But when you're like recording a drum kit from scratch, you've got to actually force yourself to think, how can I make this sound better with what I've got available here, and that's definitely, teaches you a lot about how to mix down and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, it helped definitely.
Well, that's great. And when you were talking about, there were so many things there that you mentioned that come into the production of a song, and you talk about like certain rudiments being broken down and being able to go outside of the box, if you will. And a lot of times I hear musicians arguing about somebody making a song incorrectly, and it's the argument of structure versus artistic, I guess, liberty, and not following. You mentioned 4/4 time, or even following any structure that we could label to it, going all over the place. And you need to know music really well to do it properly. It's almost like abstract art. Just because you can throw two colors on a piece of, board doesn't mean you've made art, but there are some of the greatest art pieces, and that's all it is. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do, yeah. I get exactly what you're saying. When you've got people that, you've got kind of exceptions to that rule. Like people like Aphex Twin, who are obviously just I don't know if you've seen any of his interviews, but he obviously doesn't do anything in like the proper way. But generally speaking, I think, especially with something like Jungle, where sonically, there's so much going on. It's not like the kick drum is most of the track and everything kind of fits around that. It's like if you've got a good understanding of the different kind of relationships between, where different frequencies need to sit and how an overall curve should look, on a mastering EQ or whatever, and all that stuff. It makes things easier rather than just complete trial and error. Although, a lot of people would probably disagree with me there. But there you go, yeah.
Well, that's what I mean. I love seeing the discussions. There's an old Andy Warhol saying, I think it goes, don't worry if what you've made is good or bad art. Let the rest of the world figure that out. And while they're trying to figure out if what you've done is good, bad, or even art, go make more art. So that's what I say to producers that are playing outside of the lines. Just keep doing what you're doing. What would you say is your inspiration to want to create? Like, when did you decide that you wanted to be a producer?
So I've always made music. I was in bands, and like I said, I used to play in orchestras and amateur orchestras when I was younger. So I've always had an idea that music was something that gave me a lot of satisfaction, and I've always been more interested in making music than being like an audiophile or collecting loads of vinyl or having a huge music collection. It's always been that's always been my focus. But I mean, I guess Jungle for me, it was probably tunes kind of reggae remixes, stuff with big hooks, like Paulie Walnuts did a tune, Plead My Cause, or and then I kind of heard stuff like Blade Runner and Serum, and then that kind of rolling, the kind of three parties that I mentioned, kind of got into that. But it's not an easy question for me to answer, because I never kind of one day just thought, this is absolutely what I want to do. I've always just made music, and there was a point where I was playing in bands and doing this, and this is what I love doing now. Every day I'm listening to Jungle. I'm trying to I'm working on a new EP at the moment. So yeah, it's a difficult one to answer. To be honest with you.
Okay, let me ask you this then. Would you say that a successful DJ must be a producer in today's industry?
Well, no. I think there are definitely people who don't produce, but that does tend to be the norm nowadays, doesn't it? Because I mean, I suppose now vinyl's kind of coming back again, and you get a lot more people, vinyl-only DJs. But really, if you look back sort of, 5-10 years, everything's CDJs. Arguably, it's never been easier to mix. It's never been easier to kind of perfect DJing. So yeah, I think for a lot of people, you've got to have the edge, and that edge is that you've got your own tracks, and obviously, if you're the only person playing those tracks, then then that gives you something that sets you apart. But I suppose in one word, no, I don't think it's completely necessary, because I know people who can play, incredible jungle sets. I've got a mate who's, he plays like all vinyl jungle sets, and some of his sets kick the shit out of mine, just because he's a good DJ. So.
Well, and I get what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying. I find it interesting that there's a great synergy made between producers and DJs, because some producers aren't the greatest DJs. Pendulum would be a good example of where you have this grouping of guys where one of them has to take the reins and be the DJ, while the other guys are kind of the men behind the curtains. But there's something to be said about people who just align themselves with other producers. Someone like Nicky Blackmarket, Kenny Kenner, guys that come to mind right away, where you made mention of having tunes that nobody else has. You don't necessarily need to be the one making them. You just need to be friends with the guys making them, right? So
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And so I do believe that there's a place. I think it's harder for a producer to make it and not DJ than it is for a DJ to make it and not produce. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, it depends what you mean by make it. If you mean make any money, then absolutely, you've got to do gigs to get any, to get any return, really. The way the music industry is very difficult to make. Maybe you can make a bit selling vinyl, but yeah, you've got to do gigs, absolutely. And also, yeah, you've got to keep on the festival circuit. You've got to keep, you've got to keep gigging. Otherwise, you've got to be in people's minds. You know what I mean? So yeah,
exactly, 100%. Let me ask you this: what equipment are you currently using to produce, based on what you started on? Like, how have you progressed?
I've not really come far. I've got a laptop. I've got on there at the moment. I've got Ableton 10, which is a fairly recent thing for me. And for years I've been running. I've got Pro Tools on there as well, which I do a bit of recording with. And I've been running Fruity Loops FL10 for like, I don't know when I got it, like 6 or 7 years ago. And for jungle, I've been using that because I find it very, very quick, very easy, very.
So you're 100% software. You aren't using any external devices.
I have like one little Korg keys synth, and my thing is I like to record. So like when I'm doing like a remix of a reggae song, for example, right, if all I'm starting from is an acapella, I'd like to try. Generally, what I'll do is I'll like sit there with the guitar and I'll kind of I'll use that to get an idea of the key and the chords in my head, and then I'll try to record little bits as much as I can where it's going to be useful to get little chords, maybe piano stabs, other instruments. I've recorded saxophone and clarinet, bass guitar and stuff like that. So I like to record, but no, I'm not a big like hardware nut. I'm not one of these people who try and say, you cannot get that sound without using a real sampler or you cannot, get that real saturation without running it hot through a real desk. Or I don't think that's true. I think for some people, maybe that's the way they do it, and then they get a great sound. But for a lot of people, I think if you've got a way of getting a great sound in the box, then that's it. You know how to do it. It's your ears, really, at the end of the day. So.
Okay, let me ask you this then, for argument's sake. If you had $10 million show up in your bank account tomorrow, and you could go to the store and purchase any equipment, are you telling me that you wouldn't invest in hardware because you don't need it, or is there pieces that you might buy that would improve your setup?
I would, but the main thing that I would, if I had 10 million in my pocket tomorrow, the main thing I would do is get an incredible room with because you can spend, thousands and thousands on treating a room and all that. So I would think more in terms of getting the best possible studio space with a live room, with a great drum kit, with all the right microphones, and I'd like to do something like that. In terms of hardware, yeah, I mean, I probably would buy would buy a desk, probably would buy a synth, I probably would buy this compressor and that compressor, but it wouldn't be the first thing that I'd look to buy, if you know what I mean.
I hear you, buddy. And you know what? I think it's reasonable to think that we can Like when you brought up Fruity Loops, to me that was, I didn't even know that the program was still out there. I haven't heard that name in years. But you know, Ableton, Pro Tools, you're using some. These are programs that have made some of the greatest sounds that we hear. Yet you'll still hear people say you need hardware to make the best sound. So I love hearing the discussion. I love playing devil's advocate, and I don't think there is a correct answer. I think it's all opinionated at the end of the day.
Totally, yeah. And what you've got to bear in mind with Fruity Loops is it's completely external plugins. So really, when I say I'm using Fruity Loops, the sound is coming from, you know, so many independent VST makers making these 32-bit VSTs, which are now obsolete. You can't get these on Ableton 10. You can only do 64-bit. You can't get these on Logic because they're obsolete now. But the truth is that there's this community online of people that spend hours and hours making lots of like free, interesting plugins, instruments, also plugins that give warmth, saturation, anything. If you like talking about analog sound, anything to kind of emulate that proper jungle sound, and that's all out there. And that's the interesting thing about using software like FL10 is really, the only thing I'm using from that is like maybe the EQ. Everything else is completely, I'm just pulling it from all sorts of different, on the internet. So yeah, so it's fun.
Okay, I want to talk about UK jungle for a moment. Can you tell me what is UK jungle?
Oh, I've lost you, man.
Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, but yeah.
What I asked is, what is UK jungle?
Do you know what? You're coming and going. You're asking me something about UK jungle, but then you keep picking up on it.
That's all it is. I'm just asking you blank. What is UK jungle?
Right, cool. It's a label which was started off as a digital, and then about a year ago put out, I think, 2 records now. It started by Marcus, so Omen Breaks, and Jordan, who's Junglord. They started it, I don't know, maybe sort of 6 years ago, but I think really it's only about 3 or 4 years ago that it started to become quite popular in the UK. And we are quite popular in the UK. And it's grown into 6 or 7 of us now. It's kind of an unofficial collective, really, and we do takeovers. So we play like festivals, and we tend to do a takeover like a 5 or 6 hour slot. We perform with Lady Soul, who's like our host, who I've just done an EP with.
No, that's awesome. So, what would you say is the mission statement of UK Jungle?
Mission statement is probably, I don't want to get into this argument, right? But I think there's a big argument online that you'll probably be aware of, like what constitutes jungle, right? So a lot of people will say, is a roller jungle, or is drum and bass jungle, da da da. I suppose UK jungle it's all about that amen sound, that old school but in your face. We were talking about that Dylan tune. The kind of experimental amen heavy jungle. It is kind of about bringing that back, basically, because I think in a lot of places in the world, like Russia, Canada, you've got like Six Sound Jack, Russia, people like Fader, and like that sound kind of never really went away. But in the UK, kind of did for a bit, and then it's sort of coming back again now. So that's a really long mission statement, isn't it? But
not really. Well, in here, I want to touch down because I have had this discussion. To be honest, I'll take it back to episode 1. This show began because I wanted to discuss the difference between drum and bass and jungle. People were calling it 2 different things, yet I thought it was one and the same. And from my discussions throughout this time, I've learned they are one and the same. It's just a change of name because of a culture.
I agree. I do.
And that culture, from the mid 90s, I think that people, they go, well, that must be the sound of jungle. And it's like, no, jungle just had to change the name because of a culture that was coming. Or the ruffians were coming in.
Yeah.
And so, but I get what you mean about the heavy amen UK jungle type sound. It's a very reggae. Even when you remove the reggae sound, that old school 94, 95 heavy amen drum and bass jungle sound. So I do understand fully, I think, what you mean. Did I say that right?
Yeah, I won't disagree with you. Yeah,
Okay.
man. It's a complicated issue, isn't it? But it is. It's all, drum bass came from jungle. It's all jungle, really, isn't it? So,
It's all jungle,
yeah.
my friends. And okay, it's what I often say to people. I'm like, it's like saying I smoke weed, you smoke pot. We both smoke the same thing, man. It's just you're calling the same shit two different names.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's true, man.
Couple last questions for you. These are fun ones, so please have fun with them. If you could create a Mount Rushmore for the jungle culture, who would your four faces be?
Oh, wow. Well, we'll have to pick. Well, yeah, I mean, I've brought his name up a few times. Probably my favourite of the, if you like, original jungle artists, because his tunes are just so minimal, so musical, but with so much attitude. I'd have to say Dillinger.
We could even put Capone as the second face.
Have to have a what?
I'm sure Dillinger would love if we put Dillinger and then Capone. Like two face.
Yeah. We could do. I'm gonna say we have to have like an MC, like someone like Top Cat or Tenor Fly. I don't know. Just purely for the ragga side of ragga jungle for me, and that live MC element. So I'll say Tenor Fly, and then I'm going to have to go with one of the more, because it was my era, the UK kind of, for me, that rolling jungle, all about simple drums and big bass lines. And so I'll have to say, again, it's difficult picking between the two, but I'll say Blade Runner.
Wow.
And I've got one left.
One left, my friend.
Probably, because for me, it's just the baddest, most rude boy jungle I've ever heard. I'd have to say 16-arm Jack, I think.
16-arm Jack?
Just, yeah. You know 16-arm Jack?
I know him personally. Odie. Like, if we're talking about the same...
Odie. Yeah.
Oh my God, he will love to hear...
I rate his tunes unbelievably. I think his tunes are absolutely unbelievable.
You're coming across the sea for that one. I can't believe you named one of our own. That's awesome. So big ups to you for naming Mr. 16-arm Jack.
No, I mean it, yeah.
You know what? I got to tell a little story actually about him. He didn't know that I know him, and there was an incident where I was trolling him on a thread, and he basically, I'm not going to get into what it was about, but at the end he basically said, "Why are you being such a dick?" And then I put a picture of the Garfield dog, Odie. Right? And then he PM'd me and he's like, "Who the fuck are you?" And I'm like, and then I told him who I was. He's actually really close friends with my ex-girlfriend, and I knew him years ago before the jungle stuff, to be honest. So he's a really nice guy, and a very, very talented artist. Okay, last question. If you could if you could put 5 items in a vault that would encapsulate our jungle culture, what would those 5 items be?
1850 folded horn, scoop, bass bin. For me, oh man, 5 items.
Yeah, you got one. And here's the thing about this.
Okay.
Hold on, let me give you an idea about this capsule. It's huge. You can put countries in there. You can put whole clubs. You can anything you want. You want to put London in there, you can throw it in. But just anything that you think encapsulates the jungle culture.
Wow. I don't know if that makes it easier or more difficult, actually. Let's go for CDJ 800, and I'm being boring. Just go for equipment here because that was the like CDJ that I learned to make sounds. So that's me, jungle. We'll have to go for like the Akai sampler, something like that, because that's pretty much the Amen sound, the wee loop in the breaks. So the Akai 2000 sampler, something like that. Oh man, what is that? 3?
3 items, yeah.
Let's go for. Let me think.
I'll tell you, just as he's thinking, some of the things people have thrown in that I've loved is people. You know, I've heard people throw in their favorite, like raver. It's like, oh, there was this guy who used to dance all the time. He had this move. Yeah, I'd put him in the vault. Or their favorite flyer, their favorite mixtape, the horns, the whistles, the lasers, the smoke. So I guess it's more also the rave, not just the jungle culture, but the whole rave, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, man. Well, okay, let's go for a festival that, you know, was my favourite growing up, Boomtown Festival in the UK. Let's put that in there.
That whole festival's going in.
And then, yeah, the whole festival, it'll fit, right? We'll put the whole thing in. And then, fuck it, he'll love this. But I put a good mate of mine, DJ, in there, because he was the guy that the first guy I knew with a pair of decks and a big stack of
You're cutting out there.
So check him out on SoundCloud. Is that it? Is that 5?
That was 5 items, but your last item, you said that you were putting your buddy in, but then you cut out during your explanation on why. You said he was the first guy that had turntables to let you use them or something?
Yeah. So he was the guy that got me into jungle. Basically, he's a massive collector of music, and he was the only guy I knew growing up who had a big stack of speakers in his bedroom and some decks. And I used to go to all the parties with him, so I'll put him in there because he probably, that's fair to say, introduced me to a lot of jungle artists at the time. So we'll stick him in there.
That's awesome. All right, well, that was that. I'm going to sign off to the listeners, but please stay on the phone with me, okay?
Yep, no worries.
All right, that was him, Mr. Supa Ape. Like I say, as always, guys, there's going to be links below to check out UK Jungle, to check out, we talked about Spirit Studio, so I'm going to throw them in the link below. It seems like an interesting institution. So, as always, thanks for tuning in, and until next time, peace out.